Good evening. Welcome, everyone. We'll wait another minute or two. Let our friends in. Oh, welcome. Good evening, everyone. Just wait one more minute. And if you would take a second to open up your chat box at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little tab for chat. If you open up the chat box, you can check in with us if you have any questions as I'm presenting here tonight about drop stitches. And keep your ears out for what I'm saying and talking about, because Suzanne will be doing a little giveaway of some gift cards during the middle of the presentation. And there will be a quiz on some of the stuff I'm talking about. So welcome. My name is Shayna Billow. I'm a knitting teacher and knitwear designer from Northern New Jersey. And I do a lot of designs with Zen Yarn Gardens, and I'm thrilled to be here with Zen Yarn Garden tonight doing their 22nd Tutorial Tuesday. And you can catch the ones that you've missed on their YouTube channel. In case you are wondering where you can find those other 21 Tutorial Tuesdays. So we are thrilled to have you here. Welcome. And my co-host tonight is Suzanne. And do you want to introduce yourself, Suzanne?
Hi, sure. I'm Suzanne Nielsen. I also do some designing for Zen and some of these Tutorial Tuesdays. And I'll be keeping an eye on the chat and interrupting Shayna if there's any questions and things. And I get to give away those gift certificates. So pay attention. I'm going to ask some questions maybe based on something Shayna teaches us. And anyway, yeah, thanks for coming.
Thank you for joining us. So here we go. Thank you. All right, so I have with me today a swatch with a few different knitted textures, and I'm going to switch over to my other camera and show you how I would pick up stitches in each of those textures and talk to you a little bit about what the structure of our knitting is like, so that you can start to feel more confident in ripping stitches down and fixing your work if you've made a mistake a few rows back. All right, so I know this is something that scares a lot of people. In fact, I think one of the commenters mentioned that they get very frightened doing that kind of thing. So I'm hoping you will feel empowered after this workshop or after our demonstration here today. So I have four stitch patterns here. Right here I have stockinette stitch, which is knit one row, purl one row. Next to that I have ribbing. This happens to be a knit one, purl one ribbing. Of course, ribbings come in all widths. You can have 2x2 ribbing, 3x3, 1x2, etc. But that concept. And then I've also got garter stitch right here, which is knitting every row. That looks the same on both sides, and I'll just show you the stockinette on the back. And then on the side, I've got seed stitch. And I very intentionally did all four of these patterns because it's important to recognize where they're similar and where they're different. Okay, so let's begin. I'm going to work across to the middle of my stockinette stitch, and I'm going to drop a stitch on purpose. Occasionally, you'll notice something like this on your knitting needle. As you're working along, that's an incomplete stitch. Anytime I come upon something that looks strange on my knitting needle, what I like to do is drop everything down and make it look worse, but to have this, when I start to see these lines, then I know it's going to get better. So when we're knitting, we have, imagine a grid, right? We've got columns here and we've got rows across. So our rows across are each one of these stitches, and each stitch has a column built up of all of the rows that we've knit in that stitch. So anytime you knit one column of a stitch, you are connecting the neighboring columns with a strand of yarn. So here's the stitch that connected these two columns, right? So I'm just going to drop that down kind of low. I'm sure anyone who's dropped a stitch in something like silk or cotton, where it just keeps running and running and running, has panicked when they've seen this. Do not panic. When you see these wonderful bars, these ladders, that's great. That's really actually a good thing, because this we can make sense of. Sometimes it's hard to make sense of little jarbles and goofy things on the needles, but this we can make sense of. So what you do when you've dropped a stitch, you're going to use a crochet hook that's a similar size to your knitting needle. So you can put both through your needle gauger, or you can just look for the millimeter size on each. But you're going to use a crochet hook that's a similar size to your knitting needle. When you've located all of this column, all of these ladders, you're going to put the loop onto your crochet hook, the last loop that you can find. And if you go in there and everything starts pulling again, then just grab the next loop below, whatever you can get that's a full loop. Now you'll notice here, I'm going to put my left pointer finger behind all of these yarns so that I can really see these ladders. Remember, these are all the rows that ripped out from this one column, of stitch. And what I'm going to do is drag each ladder through the other with the crochet hook. So I grab the next ladder and I dip it through. Grab the ladder and I dip it through. Okay. All right. If you are left-handed, you would put your finger behind your right pointer finger behind, and you would use the left hand with the crochet hook and pulling through. You can see I'm a little clumsy with it because I am right hand dominant, but this would be the idea if you were left-handed. So you're dragging one bar through the other. If you accidentally skip one, which is a common error when you are just learning to do this, if you accidentally skip one, you'll notice it creates a long strand in the back. Sometimes you might just be knitting along in your project and you'll notice that from the beginning. You'll see, oh wow, I have a weird loop here. Find the column it's associated with, drop down to that weird loop, and then scoop everything up. So this is stockinette stitch. Knit a row, purl a row. My stitches are flat. They all look like a little letter V. Okay, and I picked up from the right side, from the front of the work. If you have a rib stitch here, so I'm going to go over to the ribbing now. So here I have purl one, knit one ribbing. And let's say you drop in a ribbing a purl stitch. Here we go. It's problematic, right? I'm going to show you what happens if I pick up from this side. So this is the purl side of that stitch. I'm going to pick it up this way. You'll notice here, right under my hook, I'm making a knit stitch. So the trick for picking up stitches in ribbing is that, or on reverse stockinette, is that you want to turn the work around to the side that has the knit column. All right, what's knit on one side is purl on the other. Knit and purl are yin and yang. So when you knit a stitch, you're putting a purl in the back. And when you purl a stitch, you're putting a knit in the back. So you would just turn your work to the knit side to pick up that stitch, and then you would turn it back. Okay. Oh, the edge stitch. Yes, and I will, when I get to the end, I will do my best. All right, so here we have, so I just mentioned that knit and purl are like yin and yang, right? So a knit stitch, on the front of a knit stitch, you have a V, and in the back of the knit stitch, you have a little bump. Whereas a purl stitch has the bump right in the front of the work, and the V is in the back. So this was a purl stitch. You can see that little bump. And here's the V. And for the knit stitch, here's my V in the front of the work and a bump in the back. For some of you, that might be very clear and obvious already, and for others, that might be an epiphany. But I'm hoping that you'll start to look at your knitting in that way, where you can start to see what the stitches actually look like as you are creating them. But anytime you're picking up a drop stitch where you have a stockinette base, so here it's all stockinette. These 5 stitches here are stockinette stitch. Here, I'm alternating reverse stockinette and stockinette, reverse stockinette and stockinette. Here's my stockinette, reverse stockinette. So really, these columns here break down to being the same as a stockinette column. So if you drop a stitch in ribbing, or if you've messed up your ribbing and you only have, let's say you were supposed to do 1 by 1 ribbing, but somewhere you did a couple knit stitches in a row, you can drop down just the column and repair only that column rather than having to rip everything out. I use this technique of the crochet hook drop, I would say 95% of the time when I'm fixing my students' work. Anything that's messed up, my first step is to try to fix just the column that it's in before I start ripping everything out. Okay, so we've gotten a handle on stockinette stitch and our ribbing. And actually, you know what I'm going to do right before the break, our commercial break? I'm going to rip out to the edge. So here I'm tinking, I'm undoing the knitting, and we are going to drop the edge stitch. And then after I do that, during the commercial break, I'll get over to our garter stitch. All right, so here, edge stitches are interesting. If you recall, when I dropped down these stitches, we had these columns, and then right in between the bars. And then that's what I lifted up. I took my crochet hook and I pulled up the bars, the stitch through the bars. When you're on the edge of the work, it's a little bit different because as we're knitting our rows, think about this with me. You start knitting a row this way, and then you turn around and you knit a row that way. And then you turn around and you knit a row this way. So on our edges, every 2 rows are connected with a little loop. So if you've ever dropped an edge stitch, and you'll see this, you might get into a panic that you have this huge loop. What that huge loop is actually 2 rows worth of knitting. It's this bar and this bar, this bar and this bar. That's what the edges are. So these are all 2 rows worth of knitting connected where I turned the work at the edge of the row. So this is really just for straight knitting, this particular technique. But here I've got my crochet hook. I'm going to open up that first bar and pull them through, or the first loop, and pull 1, 2 bars through. Okay, here I've got my second loop. I'm going to grab 1 and then 2. And then I'm going to grab my third loop. I'm opening it up flat, straightening it out. And then I grab the first bar and then the second bar. So that's how edge stitches work. And that's why they're a little bit different from working in the middle of the piece, because you've got that turn where you've turned your work to work the next row. Because our first stitch will be connected, let's say we have 20 stitches on the needle, stitches 1 and then 20, and then 20 back to 1. Every time you turn the work around at stitch 1 or stitch 20, you've created a join. All right, so that's the edge stitch and stockinette. Edge stitch and stockinette, and some ribbing, which technically are just columns of stockinette. All right, so we're going to take a quick break, and Suzanne will give you a little quiz on what we've done. So let's see.
Hi. All right, so this is for, we're going to give away 2 $20 gift certificates. So I'm going to ask a question, which is, what did Shayna and let's put it in the chat, or you can try raising your hand if you can't have access to the chat, and I will try and see who raises their hand first and call on them. Otherwise, just try and type it in the chat fast. But what did she say was the first step when you come across something that looks crazy on the needles? Oh, now I'm going to have to think of what the actual answer was.
I know there were 2 really good answers there.
I know. Oh man. So the answer I was thinking in my head was to drop that stitch, but I really like the don't panic one.
I like that one too. I do too.
Okay.
Technically, I think I said drop down.
Yeah.
But I should have started with don't panic. So
Don't panic. I like that one. But we'll give this one to Catherine. So Catherine, if you could send your email to Zen Yarn Garden, and And yeah, just you can do a private message to Zen Yarn Garden, and then they will get you your gift certificate. So yes, that everybody's paying attention, it seems like. So they're really learning something here, Shayna.
Way to go, gang. Excellent.
Okay, the next question is just for those paying attention. This is an easy one, so get ready here. What color yarn is Shayna working with? Ah, they got it. They got it fast.
You've
Okay.
really been paying attention, everyone. This is great.
They're really good. Yes. Okay. I think the first person I see is just a second. I'm trying to scroll because everybody answered so quickly.
Tanya.
Did
Maybe.
you see it?
Yeah, Tanya St. John.
Okay.
I hope I pronounced your name correctly. And congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations. Okay. So yeah, send your email. And I still can't see it, but yeah. Is it Tanya or
Yes,
Tanya?
I guess.
Good job, yay. So yeah, send your email to Zen Yarn Garden. They'll get your gift certificate. You get $20 off of anything on the website. So we've got lots of fun things. We've got 2 more Tutorial Tuesdays scheduled out, what they're going to be. And I'm going to be leading those ones on how to choose cast-ons that are best, and just how to do some interesting cast-ons that you might come across in some different patterns. Beyond like Kitchener or beyond the common ones, I'll go over like tubular cast on and things. And then also binding off on the following week. So come join us for those. And yeah, let's get back to Shayna for some more information.
Thank you. Thanks, Suzanne. And congrats, everyone. All right. So we've talked about stockinette, which is sort of the, I don't want to say simple way to pick up stitches, but it's a little bit more straightforward. I know if you're new to it, it all seems really hard. But we are going to switch over to garter stitch. Garter stitch and combinations of garter, which we'll talk about in a minute with seed stitch, are fascinating because we have both a V and a bump layered on top of one another in the column. So as I showed you over here, when you pick up from the front, you create the V. And if you're trying to get one of these bumps and you're picking up in the front, you can't really get it. It's very tricky to pick up a bump from the front. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to drop some of these down. So you'll notice here, I've got a V, and here I've got a bump. Here I've got a knit. Here I've got a purl is another way to say those. All right, so let's just say for fun that I was to pick these up all from the front. You'll notice here, I am getting a random rib stitch in the middle of my garter. Okay, incidentally, this is how you can fix one of these issues if you happen to notice it in your knitting that you didn't realize, like you goofed up some seed stitch. It's possible to fix just those stitches without ripping the whole thing. All right, so I'm going to rip down back to where I began, and there are a couple ways to fix this. Let's see, my favorite way to fix them is with a crochet hook here. I already have a V stitch. I already have a flat stitch. So my next one is going to be a bump. I'm coming from behind the work, and I'm going to bring my loop above or behind the bar and then come like this. So technically my hook for that bump stitch came from the back. Right now my hook is in front and it's pushing towards my finger, and I'm grabbing a regular V. That was our stockinette style pickup. And now here, the hook is coming from behind, and it's going behind that bar and grabbing this loop here. Okay, and I come from below. Now that may be a little tricky for some of you. It's a hard garter stitch. While it's the easier stitch to create, is I think the trickier one to pick up. Another tool you can use is the Fix It tool, and there are a couple brands of these. I'm just going to put a link up in our chat for this tool. It's a double-ended crochet hook, and you may want to invest in a set of these for yourself, because here I'm going to pick up my V, then I'm going to swing this around and pick up my bump, my purl stitch. Then I'm going to pick up my V, and then I don't have to take the hook out as I was doing with my other hook, my single-sided hook. I can just slide to the other end of the hook and pick up that bump there. So a tool like that kind of helps pick up the bar from behind. Essentially, we're purling that stitch instead of knitting it. So you could also, to think about it this way, you could also slide that stitch on here and then purl it with this yarn. Essentially, what we're doing is going down, purling the stitch and bringing the yarn up, but with a hook. Okay, so it's a little trickier to do garter. I'm going to show you one more time, and then I'm going to demonstrate with seed stitch how it's similar to garter stitch. Okay, so here we go. And I'm going to show you my single crochet hook method, single-ended crochet hook method again, just because for now, many of you probably have just a single-sided crochet hook. And here you'll notice some of my bars are hiding. Ta-da, there's one that was hiding. Because with garter stitch, we have this ridged texture and our fabric is more condensed. The bars tend to hide one another, behind one another. So here it's very important that you get your hand in the right spot, and you can use these as a guide for what stitch you're going to be picking up. So here, this one, the yarn that's in the behind is going to be a knit stitch, and the one that's coming forward is a purl. So I'm going to pinch the stitch with my hook coming from behind the bar that I intend to purl. I'm going into my loop, and then I'm going to drag my bar through the loop. Now my hook is automatically placed for the knit stitch, grabbing that. Then I'm coming out of my stitch, I'm pinching it, coming from above and behind the next bar that I need. And then I'm going to grab the stitch and pull through. And then here I'm ready for a knit. And then finally my purl. So whenever I have students that do this, they typically struggle with skipping bars. So just be patient with yourself as you're learning it. And I would recommend knitting a swatch like this and practicing on all different stitches before you practice on your real projects. So now this texture here was, even though to get the texture, you knit a row and then knit another row, the look of it from the right side is knit a row, purl, knit a row, purl. You're getting purl bumps, right? So whereas here, the texture from the front is all knit. Here, the texture is knit, then purl, knit, then purl. So if we whittle that down just to one column, we have alternating knits and purls. That is exactly what seed stitch is. They're just, the columns are offset from one another, but essentially you are stacking the same stitch atop one another, going back and forth, and that's what creates this texture. So this garter stitch texture is actually the same when we look at it in terms of columns as a seed stitch texture. So my feeling with most stitches in knitting is that they can be broken down into just the binary knit or purl. How do these stitches relate to one another? How do they stack on top of one another? So here's a garter stitch chart, and here's a seed stitch chart. If we were to, they look the same. They are the same, just offset by a half stitch. So if you have double moss, if you have 2x2 ribbing, all these columns can relate to one another. There's not much that gets changed between different stitches. I'm saying all this to hopefully make you feel a little more confident in looking at your stitches and feeling like, oh, I can recognize what's going on in that column and fix it. I've got this. So here we are, okay? And we've got the same kind of vibe as the garter stitch. We've got some of these bars in the front, some hiding in the back. That's just their nature. The difference with seed stitch is that we're actually going to be alternating. The ones that are popping in the front, we're going to grab as knit stitches because we want to alternate them with the neighboring stitches. And the one that's in the back is going to be the purl stitch. So that is the only difference. Sometimes what I'll do, if looking to the neighboring stitches isn't helping you figure out where you are, if I see the little purl at the bottom of my hook, I know my next stitch is the knit, is the one that I grab from underneath. So here I've got the V, the flat knit stitch, so my next one is a purl. So I come behind, I've pinched that stitch so I don't lose it, bring my hook behind the yarn, and then I drag it through. So here's my knit, and here is my purl. So we do have the chat box open. Whoop. Oh, good. Okay, I made a mistake. See, I put on the 2 stitches here at once. So if you can figure it out just to grab the 1 stitch, that's fine. Or drop it again. Make it look like the bars. This, to me, makes sense, right? Here are my rows, and here's the column. So once you can make sense of that, and you know what you're picking up the stitches, what order you're picking up the stitches in, whether it's all knits, whether it's knits and purls, it all starts to make sense if you can turn your knitting into just looking at the column that the stitches are rather than panicking about the whole thing. If you happen to drop 2 stitches at once, what I would recommend is just carefully grabbing one of the stitches and putting it on a stitch holder or like a lock ring stitch marker. I almost did it again. And then dealing with the other one. Or just grabbing it on your needle. Like just secure what you can and work on one column at a time. I will show you real quick since we're at the end of our time. If anyone had questions, please let me know in the chat. I'll show you how to fix an edge stitch in seed, or this could be equivalent to garter stitch, of course, because it's that same alternating texture rather than the stockinette texture. So I'm pulling these out until I have just a single loop here. Okay. And I'm going to grab this. Here's my loop. My first stitch, I see here, I've got a flat, so I need a bump on the edge for seed. So I'm picking up purlwise for the first half of the loop and knitwise for the second half of the loop. So here it's going to be purlwise for the first half of the loop and knitwise for the second half of the loop. And again, if you are not brave with, letting the stitch just hang there as I was, you can certainly get the fix it tool where here the stitch didn't have to hang. It's always secure until I drop it. But here we go. And then we would purl the stitch, so you can purl it off of the hook if you were so inclined, or put it on your left needle and then purl it there. Beautiful. Does anyone have any questions for me? How are y'all doing? And again, most stitch patterns can, if you just look at the columns of them, they're very similar to one another. So here's my ribbing, and here's my stockinette. And here is reverse stockinette, this column here, and here's some reverse stockinette. Here's garter, one column of garter, and here's a column of seed, and they're the same. So it all works out that way. Certainly if you've stacked up like 2 knits, 2 purls, 2 knits, 2 purls, you just have to accommodate for that in your pattern. But basically, these 4 patterns are so related and will be helpful throughout your knitting career. Kimberly says her blood pressure jumped every time I dropped the stitches. Yes, that can happen. Yes, but you don't have to pull everything out to fix it when you're knitting. I always try to do as little damage as I can to the whole piece, or as I try not to rip at all costs. I try to. So I love knitting, but I don't like re-knitting things. So if I can fix just a column of a project, it's wonderful. And you can drop stitches like this on cables. You can drop stitches with brioche. There's different considerations to make with these things, but it's possible with all stitch patterns to drop. Even you can drop down yarn overs. You can drop down knit front and backs. You just have to pick them up. You have to start thinking about the structure of the stitches and how you're going to pick them up. So I wish you all the best of luck. I'm just going to peek and make sure I didn't miss anything. Thank you all so much for your wonderful comments. And don't forget, next tutorial Tuesday is going to be how do I cast on, how to choose and why. And I wish you all the best of luck picking up your stitches. Do practice on a swatch, because it's not as connected as your real project. So happy knitting, happy fixing. And it was so nice to see everybody tonight. Thank you so much for coming. And thank you to Zen Yarn Garden for hosting these Tutorial Tuesdays. It was nice being with you.
Thanks, ladies. Thanks, Shayna.
Thank you. Good night.